Hey, folks, welcome to the Battles of the First World War podcast. So, returning to the podcast is Steve Girard, a U.S. Army veteran and veteran battlefield guide. Steve has studied the American Expeditionary Force for several decades. He's been the unit historian for U.S. Army 2nd and 4th Infantry Divisions, the 10th Mountain Division, the 101st Airborne Division, the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, and the 5th and 6th Marine Regiments. Steve also served as a special historical consultant, World War I, to the History Division, Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. He's worked as a historian and researcher for World War I 4th Brigade, the Marine Brigade, 2nd Division, for various military historians and authors like Mr. George B. Clark, Mr. Kevin Selden, Mr. James Gregory, Lieutenant Colonel Pete Owen, United States Marine Corps, retired, Lieutenant Colonel John Swift, United States Marine Corps, retired, and Lieutenant Colonel Walt Ford, also United States Marine Corps, retired, and Mr. Mike Miller. Steve joins us today to talk about the history of the AEF Tank Corps. And I couldn't leave this out, and it's a point of contention with Steve. So you might remember that in the past that Steve was actually an infantryman. Although he was a mechanized one. So what is a leg doing talking about tankers? Well, Steve knows what he's talking about, so he can come on and he can talk about it. I'm sure he's going to have words here too. So Steve, welcome back.
Wait, you know what, man? I'd have beat you with a track jack just for saying that. I mean, honest to God, man, still can't believe that.
You know,
yeah, I hope you Q2'd on table 8. I really do. I hope you Q2'd.
My God.
Back off.
Dude, that's so mean. Like, I was like,
yeah,
I was really questioning, should I do that? And then I was like, yeah, definitely, you should.
Oh, yeah, no, for the audience, no, I am, well, in the old school, because Mike's old school too. I'm an 11 Mike. But yeah, which is mechanized infantry, and I had the pleasure of being assigned to B Company in my 24-year career with various units. But Bravo Company always got sent with the tank battalion, and I've got time with 35th Armor, 68th Armor, 66th Armor, 77th, and of course the 11th Cavalry, both 1st and 2nd Squadrons. So, but my repertoire is yes. I am an honorary tank, member of 268 Armor when we went to Bosnia. So, but
cool.
this is something that really never gets talked about, because World War I, we always talk about the Marines or the Lost Battalion or the aviators, Rickenbacker or whatever, but
right.
The one group that never really gets talked about is, the tank crews, because their lineage and their from what they accomplished in 8 years ago reverberates even to this very day because of their sacrifice. We still have tanks, in the Army, and especially with the combined arms battalions now.
Right.
It all goes back to these guys, in France.
Yep. And Steve, I understand you want to dedicate this episode to a very special group of friends of yours and comrades.
Yeah. This year marks the 30th anniversary of Operation Joint Endeavor. And also because our sacrifices that we did down there we don't get talked about as well. The way we share that with the World War I tanker.
This was the Army peacekeeping operation in Bosnia during the Yugoslav Civil War in the 90s.
Yep. In the 90s, and like I said, and I want to dedicate this to all my Silver Lions out there. Colonel Anderson, actually Brigadier General Anderson, Sergeant Major Gainey. My old company commander, Paul Kreis, my platoon leader, Hector Garcia, platoon sergeant Mike Mansfield, Jeffrey Ellington, Gerald Logan, Mike Cummings, Jamie Vidler, myself, Jennifer Santamon, to all my Silver Lions, I haven't forgotten about you guys, and I dedicate this episode to all of you, everything that we did, like I said. And with that, I say Silver Lions to all of you. I miss you guys.
Super cool, man.
Oh, one other thing. Yeah, you also go to your unit too, Mike, because your old unit, 1st Squadron, 1st Cavalry.
Yeah.
They were the first to cross the Sava River.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So,
I remember hearing about that.
We watched, we were waiting for them to get across the river. And then after that, everybody was going south.
Yeah, I remember first across the Sava, sir. Yeah. Yep. I remember that. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll get right to it, man. So today we're going to talk about the AEF Tank Corps. So, I mean, this first question, it may seem kind of obvious, Steve, but I think, it's just a lead in. So what led to the formation of the AEF's Tank Corps in World War I?
Well, what happened is how this all started out, this little fledgling corps that morphed into something we have today, started in 1917. What happened was the United States Army sent a military commission. Basically, they were observers over to the Western Front, and they drew up a report and say, hey, the Brits are using this new thing. They call it a land ship or a tank.
Yep.
And they actually sent, like I said, observers up to the front lines, especially when, with the Brits, when they did the attack on Cambrai there in 17. Mm-hmm. And they were impressed about what they saw. And we're like, oh, wow, if we end up going to war, I think we're going to need to use this. And so the commission typed up a report, and this came out in I think it was April or May of 17. I think it was, May of 17. And when Patton's staff, when Patton, or not Patton, we'll get to him in a minute, but Pershing.
Okay.
So when Pershing got his staff together, he was given a copy of this, and it's like, this is interesting. And he was really, as a cavalryman himself, in his younger days, he was looking like, yeah, I think we're going to need this. So, and that goes into how all this little thing got started. And it's like, how do you that's how this, the AEF Tank Corps really started. It was by this little report that was given by these observers. So that's how this all came to be. So then, yeah.
So, I mean, so the AEF decides, all right, we need a tank corps. Obviously, they're probably pretty short-handed on tanks at the time.
Well, it's basically, it's just like, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you start something from nothing?
Yeah. So starting from nothing, who's the poor SOB who got stuck with standing up?
Who got stuck with this? As a matter of fact, that's where Blackjack had some very interesting, individuals on his staff.
Okay.
And so how this all started was like I said, Percy gets the report. He looks like, okay, hey, we're going to need a tank corps. Okay, who's the lucky individual who gets stuck with this? Oh, I got the right guy. And that was Brigadier General Samuel D. Rockenbach. And Rockenbach was a cavalry officer. Then he got stuck on Pershing's staff as a quartermaster because they're going to need horses, in France.
Sure.
So that's how he gets stuck with this. So Rockenbach's like, oh my God, I got to start. It was like, how am I going to do this? It's like, the old man wants me to start up a tank corps from when he got tanks. And how am I going to do this?
Right.
Well, lo and behold, there was also that went over to France. It was also on Pershing's staff, was a very bright young cavalry officer by the name of George S. Patton Jr. So we all know where the legend, the man, the myth, and the legend comes from, because all of us, we've all seen the movie, we've all heard stories about what, and George Patton was really is what they say he really was. And so Rockenbach falls back on Pat, says, hey, guy, come here. Hey, well, at the time he was a captain. So he's like, hey, got a mission for you. Says, I want you to start a tank school. And Patton's like, oh, well, all right, sir. So exactly what happens. So he goes, he gets another bright individual by the way of Captain Eglin Brine, and they're both charismatic per se. And so Patton, it's like gets together with Brine. And it's like, we've got to start this thing up from nothing. So what are we going to do? So Patton goes out and goes up with the gets with the French.
Okay.
And also, so originally, Patton, with Brain's help, they're going to start up the very first U.S. Army, tank school.
Okay.
And that's be in, gets with the French military and also with our guys and say, hey, I need a piece of land to find this thing, get this thing set up. So they scout around and just around the Dijon area.
Okay.
And they actually find a little place outside of Bourg, France. That's where the very first U.S. Army tank center is going to be set up at. It's a place called Bourg.
Okay.
So and this gets set up in like was it November 10th of 1917.
Okay.
So it's going to take about a couple months, about 3-4 months to get this thing set up. So in the meantime, Patton's, like I said, he's got a brain. His brain is unbelievable, and he literally is a man ahead of his time because he comes, gets with the French and say, okay, hey, we're gonna, I'm gonna need a vehicle for our tank crewmen to use, in the combat. What do you have?
Yeah.
So he goes up to the French armor school that they got up there, which is still around today. Damn it, I can't remember the name of it because it's where the French armor museum's at. Really, that's an awesome museum.
Some more.
Yeah, that's it. Some more. He goes up there. So and he gets in there, and so he's driving around in one of the Schneiders that they have up there.
Yep.
And then the Saint Chamond, which is basically an assault gun. It's not everybody thinks it's a tank because it's got a 105 mounted on it. But the thing is, the 105 is fixed, so it's basically an assault gun. That's what it is. Then he finally finds his mount per se that he falls in love with, the Renault FT-17. And this is the great granddaddy of the M1 Abrams tank itself. And he's like, this is what I need right here. So then once he finds the piece of armor that's going to be the armor branches or the tank corps, steed per se. Right. Then he goes back and say, okay, we're going to need to have trainers set up, and that way when we start getting the first group of guys to come in, they're going to start learning how to do maintenance, on how to tear these things apart, how the tracks work. They actually has gunnery mock-ups so they can actually shoot. There's photographs of these things, really the mock-ups. Okay. With the turret, and they got guys in there, they got everything set up. And so while this is going on, this is back here in the States, we can lead into that as well, where this is where how the first tankers end up coming in. So while Patton and Rockenbach are getting things set up in France, right, back here in the United States, it's like, hey, we need to start getting people, we need to start finding recruits to get it, in the vehicle. So that's when they come up with the tank, the AEF, the tank corps, so everybody's scratching their heads like all these guys like, what's a tank? I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Like, okay, so it's something innovative. So I'm like, okay. So the Army goes around, has to set up a tank school here, or here in the United States. Mm-hmm. Well, this is where another charismatic individual comes into the play in this, and it's kind of weird because this is all going to kind of meet at the very end of the story here later down the road. But a very young captain by the name of Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Okay.
Yeah, and he gets handed the job of setting up a tank training center or / school here in the United States. Well, the Army's was looking around for a place to find this thing. You'll never believe where. And I tell all you 19 kilos this too. Fort Knox is not the original home of the Armor. It's not.
Right.
It's Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, because that's where the very first U.S. Army Tank Training Center named Camp Colt was established in 1917.
Wow.
So, yeah, and everybody's like, I used to get in it with you guys all the time about this. I'm like, oh, no, it's Fort Knox. No, it's not Fort Knox. No, what do you mean? It's like, no, the very first United States Army Tank School in the United States was established at Camp Colt, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. You're like, really? It's like, yeah. Matter of fact, Gettysburg, where there's a housing unit up there, right off the battlefield, that's where Camp Colt is. As a matter of fact, the old swimming pool, you can still see where the swimming pool was.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask if there's any vestiges of Camp Colt.
If you ever get up there, I'll take you where it's at.
Sure.
But but the swimming pool, you can actually see the swimming pool is actually where they actually built it on the battlefield.
Oh, wow.
So so they weren't too happy. Well, the residents weren't too happy about this. Mm-hmm. So, so Eisenhower brings Mimi up here, and so Ike has the duty of establishing, Camp Colt. So they start getting the very first battalions of recruits coming in. It's basically what Camp Colt is basically like basic training before they, that's basically because right at the point they don't have nothing. It's a tanks training center, but with no tanks.
With no tanks.
Yeah, with no tanks. It's like, how does this thing happen?
Steve, question for you. Okay, tank school with no tanks.
Right.
What kind of men are they looking for? What does it take to get into the tank corps here in the States?
They want robust but energetic men that can know how to think for themselves. Because like I said, this is a new concept that's never been dealt with before.
Okay.
So, and they've got immigrants, that come in just just like any other Army unit. Like as example is Joe D'Angelo, who we'll talk about him in a little bit. But they want men to be these World War I tankers to think outside the box, because like I said, this is a very new concept that's never been done before. So it's like when Patton, when he's drawing up, the how things are going to be, like I said, he envisioned, he did. He foresaw the future. He really did. But, like I said, we'll talk about more about that here later down the road. But like you said, he wanted men that were energetic, were enthusiastic, and it's like, okay, hey, I want to do this because, as like I said, this is a brand new concept that's never been done before. And so you got to have faith in yourself, in your, the guys that you're going to be with. Right. That's what you guys are to this day. With when you guys go down to, Fort Benning, down at the armor school down there, it's like, you got all these kids, like, because, you're, I want to do what grandpa did in World War II on a Sherman tank.
Mm-hmm.
It was the same thing, or great granddad did in France in 1918 on a tank there in the Argonne.
Right.
I've actually had met guys that actually had lineage they like that. Were going like World War I, World War II, and the Gulf War and all that. But that's what Pat was looking for: bright, energetic men that were enthusiastic about what they were going to do. And he did. They really did. The tank corps probably got the best, smart guys you can ever possibly imagine. They did.
It's interesting. I was thinking along the lines if like the Army would be screening for like, mechanics, but I know like, in 1917, like they're, auto mechanics, like obviously there were cars in the cities and everything, but like I can't imagine like there were many mechanics around. So I was thinking along those lines.
Actually, it's like you said with mechanics, but also you have guys who are blacksmiths, with horses. It's like for them, it's the closest thing that you're going to get to it. Like it's the same thing. With you and I both know, with in the modern day Army, when a maintenance section is basically your tank breaks, what do you do? Call the 88 out, come haul you back to UMCP, and they're going to mechanics are like blacksmiths fixing putting a shoe on a horse.
Right.
This is actually what they're doing.
Right.
So, but and getting back to what we're talking about with Patton, like I said, he was very, very smart, and he actually, I don't know how he did it, but he really did. George S. Patton was way ahead of his time. And when we're talking about, I don't know if we want to go into the tactics, but go ahead.
No, just so a couple of things, a couple of thoughts that I'm having here. First, for folks who may not know, so Steve's talking about if your tank breaks down, you get the maintenance section out, and you get the 88 to drag you. The 88 is the M88. It's the Army's tow truck
recovery
tanks. Yeah, it's the armored recovery vehicle. And then UMCP. Now this one I haven't actually physically said these letters together in about 30 years. So, but I'm thinking it's unit maintenance collection point, right? Like,
yep. Yeah.
Okay. Also, just to go back to the beginning, for folks listening, if you haven't been in the military, this is a hell of a thing that like the military does is like, they'll say, Sergeant so-and-so or Lieutenant Captain so-and-so, I need you to start a tank school for the entire United States Army.
Yeah.
It's like, you're kidding. And they very much mean it. And you are expected to start it. So it's like, if you could be given any sort of requests along these lines of like, hey, in a week, you're going to set up a dinner for, 300 officers of the French Army. And I want you speaking passable French by that time, and also have like a 7-course meal laid out. Those are your orders. Go out and execute. And like, this is simply what you're expected to do. And so like in 1 week, you're going to have a 7-course meal ready for 300 guys. And you're going to be speaking passable French, and you're going to make it all happen. It's just like these gargantuan tasks. So really, really something impressive.
Like with like you said, with George Patton, because at the time, he was, captain, so like I said, Rockenbach hands him this thing and said, hey, I'm tasking you to do this. And George he had some very good individuals there with him. Like you said, he had Eglin, Brian there. Another one of his right-hand men was a young captain by his name was Cyrano E. Brett, and he's those individuals actually helped him get the thing set up there in France, because the very first battalions, basically they're literally recruit battalions is what they are, and because they're the first three that went over was the 326, 327, 328 battalions, in name.
Right.
Well, these guys are like, okay, they get put on, they get formed up, they get rudimentary basic training there.
Okay.
At camp. They're put on a train. Then they go up to Camp Mills, New Jersey, get put on a boat, going on a transport. They arrive in France. They get put on another 48 boxcars.
Yep.
They're shipped off the Borg, and George is there waiting to receive them. And I think they get into France. I think it was in the late spring or early summer of 18. So,
okay,
they don't have a lot of time to lollygag. Say, hey man, no. Patton was a stickler for discipline, and he was. And you always hear the stories about, everybody knows the 1970 movie, at the very beginning when George Patton comes in there with the siren blazing, and, going into, General Allen's headquarters and kicking names and, kicking butt. He was like that. And he told the very first, those, because he had all the three battalions there. And he told them, if you think the Marines training is tough, you ain't seen nothing yet. And he was a stickler. But the thing is, that's what they were looking for. And there were nobody complained or anything like that. And the training regime or the training program was short, concise, to the point. And these guys, they did it all. And let me back up here a little bit. So, regarding the Patton and like with the tactics, he actually came up with movement tactics, how they were to work with the infantry.
Okay.
He had, and I tell everybody this, if you really want to know about the tank corps in World War I, and it's sadly, but it's true, there's only two books that are out there about the tank corps. One's Pershing's Tankers that came out.
Okay. And
the Bible per se is a book called Treat 'em Rough. And that is the go-to book. Yep, that is the go-to book.
Okay.
And like I said, Patton's brain, I don't know how he did this, but he did from nothing. And because what he came down in his brain, he put down on paper, hasn't changed in 108 years. It really hasn't.
Interesting.
He broke it. He had how the concept of an armored tank battalion was to be set up with a headquarters element, 3 line companies, a repair and salvage company. Okay. He even came up with the concept. Now, mind you, this is 1918. He came up with a concept of a carrier transport company, which is basically the HETs.
Right.
Let you tell the audience about a HET. So
yeah, a HET is a HETT, heavy equipment
transport.
Think of a massive tractor trailer, a massive vehicle designed to a tractor trailer that each one carries one tank on it. That's a HET. They're really, really impressive vehicles.
Yeah, they are. Even the HETs, he actually came up with that concept in 1918. I'm like, it's like really, it's like, like you said, you and I are used to the HETs that we have now. That concept came up by George Patton in 1918. But the problem was, the old saying, Mike, like what's his face, the former Secretary of Defense, who said, you go to war with what you got. Well,
right.
Yeah. It's great that you have this, but hey, look, man, reality is going to smack you in the face, because it's like, hey, wait a minute. You're not going to be able to get what you want here. You're going to go with what you have. And what I mean by that is, originally Patton on paper, he had like, we're going to need 2,000 Renault light tanks, or we're going to need 200 plus I think it was about $250 for the heavy tanks, because get into the mix here, because his concept plan was originally was to have a mixed bag per se, where you had one company of heavy tanks, which were the British Mark Fives.
Okay,
because he saw these things, he fell in love with that thing too. Was to have one company of Mark Fives mixed in with the infantry battalion.
Okay.
Then behind that was to have, light tanks behind them. Then you had the infantry coming in behind the light tanks.
Okay.
Well, like I said, you go to war with what you have, what's available. And the thing is, he did. He really came up with a lot of innovative concepts. And, how they were going to move with the infantry, being a support vehicle, how, the tank was to be used as a, exploit, his thing was to attack.
Right.
And that, massive, a force on force, exploit a breach, and use the tank as cavalry to go. But the thing is, George, he had the right idea, but the thing is, technology hadn't caught up to his brain yet.
Gotcha.
It's like I said, this is his infancy. What George was envisioning, having armor being a spearhead, having, punching a hole, exploit the breach, get in the enemy's rear, and have at it. That wouldn't happen until 1991 during a Gulf War at Medina Ridge. That's George's. He had the right mindset. Like I said, technology wasn't there yet to accomplish what he wanted. Like I said, he foresaw the future. He really did. And like I said, and that's what he was installing in these very first tank battalions there at Borg, was to get them. It's like, okay, with the officers and with the NCOs and the enlisted, say, okay, this is what I want you. This is the concept that I want you guys to have in your set in your mind. So that way, when I turn you guys loose for the first time, you guys will grasp what was really going to happen.
There you go.
But like I say, the very first, training battalions there, or the tank battalions there at Borg, they went through everything just like what you guys do. And like with me, with you guys on the M1 and us on the Brads, you got a school set up. So you're going to learn how to do maintenance on these things, on the engines. You're going to do, track replacement. You're going to do, gunnery, how to install either a 37 millimeter or a Hotchkiss machine gun. It depends on what variant of Renault that you have. You're going to, you do gunnery. You're going to do movement techniques. So it's basically what we have today, at Fort Benning. It's literally, that's where all the lessons that we have, we still reverberate to this day. That's right. So that's where this all comes into play. So, but it's interesting because, like I say, with these guys at Borg, you see some of the photographs. It's funny because there's one famous photograph. You see there's a group of tankers. They're looking into the driver's compartment of a French Renault. You know what I'm talking about, right? They're all in coveralls. Yeah, they're all looking down. If you were to take that picture, like when we do, going down in the motor, doing motor stables on Monday morning, it's the same thing. It's like it hasn't changed. It literally has not changed at all. We're all sitting there, coveralls. You got the engine deck. For us in the Bradley, you got the engine deck popped up. Checking in there, pulling the rods out, and everything, checking the tracks. Same thing with you guys in the back. With the M1, pulling the engine compartment open. Yep. Same thing. Hasn't changed.
Wow. Yeah, things change, but they don't change, right? There's a lot of continuity from the past.
The only thing that changes is technology. That's all it is. That's all it is. So, but it's interesting. Like I say, in the very first, the tankers, they had a lot to learn fast, and they did. Patton was not playing games. That's why Rickenbach gave this task to him, because he saw Rockenbach loved Patton, but George was very kind of standoffish because he didn't really know. He really didn't trust higher ups
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he had that in him, but that's later down the road here. But yeah, like I say, the very first tankers, they had a lot to learn. They really did.
So, Steve, we've talked about like a lot of the personalities. We've talked about like Patton's ideas for tactics and everything, and how to employ the tanks in combat. And you've mentioned so 3 tank battalions personnel deployed from the U.S. over to France. So I think you mentioned, was it 3?
Yeah, 326, 327, 328. There's one more.
Okay. And now when they get there, there's going to be, I know they wind up changing the designation a bit. Like one of them becomes like the 344th and the 345th. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, what happens is, we'll lead into, but in the meet. So once they get to Borg, they get trained up. The other thing is they start doing one thing that was passed on to us, which we still have today, is railhead operations, and putting tanks on flat cars and getting them shipped out to where they got to go to a download point, and sort of thing. I
have a great story for later.
Yeah, the designations changed because the Army back here in the States, they go through this big change. So the 326 initially, at the time of Saint Mihiel, because like I said, we'll get into those operations here in a little bit. But in between Saint Mihiel, before Saint Mihiel, you had the 326 and 327 tank battalions in the 1st Tank Training Center. Then after Saint Mihiel, they changed designations by U.S. Army numbering system.
Okay.
So you had 344th, 345th Tank Battalions light. Then you had the 311th Tank Training Center Borg. So that's where that comes into play. Then one other thing I forgot to mention also, when we're talking about tankers, these guys neglected, but I'm not going to do it here. That is the 301st. Now, the 301st, initially what they were supposed to do was to come over to France and be integrated into the other thing is with the tank brigades. So you had the 301st. It was the first tank corps brigade. Then they redesignated that to the 304 tank brigade. Yeah, 304 tank brigade light. Okay. Now then the 301st, they were formed which is odd, but they were formed at Camp Meade, Maryland, just outside between Baltimore and D.C.
Okay.
And believe it or not, they were technically engineers. They belonged to the engineer corps. I don't know how this all got started.
Okay.
So they were known as they're the 65th engineers. Is what they were initially known as.
Okay.
So because Patton had got when he was setting everything up, because the Brits had the Mark V tank. Like I said, Patton fell in love with that thing as well. So that became it's kind of irrelevant because the initial on the collar discs that went all the way up to about 1950. Was it 51 or 52? Yeah, it was in early mid 50s. Was a side view of a Mark V tank. That was your guys' collar disc.
Oh,
that's where that comes from.
That's
Then they changed over to the with the tank and the crossovers. That changed over, but initially up until that time, it was a Mark V. That's what that was. Then, so Patton got it arranged to have these guys trained, which is irony of all things. They got sent to England.
Okay.
And guess where they end up going to?
Second Corps.
No. Well, no. Before that, so Patton's got it with the British. Say, can you guys? We got a bunch. We got a battalion coming over. Can you guys get them trained up on the Mark V? No problem. Guess where they end up going to?
Don't know.
The Royal. The British Army tank school at Bovington, England.
Oh, how about that?
Which is the premier tank museum in the world.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's funny because I when I was stationed in Germany, I got family over in the UK. We actually been up to Bovington. I highly recommend it. You've never been there?
No.
That museum is awesome.
Yeah.
And I already knew the story because that's the home of the Royal Tank Regiment, and their symbol is a Mark V, a side view of a Mark V tank.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
So what was supposed to happen was the 65th engineers were going to be trained up on the Mark V. Then once they were done, was to bring them back down to where Patton was, and it was supposed to be 1 battalion of heavies with 2 battalions light. So that's how the concept was supposed to be. However, things got changed in the works here. So they got the 65th engineers while they're in training, they get redesignated as a 301st Tank Battalion Heavy. So you got 1 battalion of heavy, 2 battalions of light. They get separate. They get detached from Patton's tank. Well, yeah, they do. They get detached, and they end up working with the BEF, with the British 4th Tank Brigade. It's where they end up going to. We'll get to those guys here in a little bit. But yeah, so like I said, in the numbering process, so yeah, the 65th Engineers become the 301st Tank Battalion Heavy. Then, like I said, then San Miguel, the light guys, they get redesignated to the 344th and 345th Tank Battalions.
Okay.
So that's what they go into when they go into the Meuse-Argonne. So that's how that plays out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, so 301st Heavies, 344th, 345th Light, part of the 304th Tank Brigade, Light. 344th, 345th, they're going to operate with the Americans in the Meuse-Argonne. 301st, they also operate with the Americans, but they operate with the AEF 2nd Corps, which is going to fight under British 4th Army in the area of the Somme, assaulting the Hindenburg Line up there.
Those guys always get neglected when they always do, but and their contributions play dividends as well, because like I said, and we'll get that here, in the big overall here in the battles and all that, because like I said, the light guys are the ones that actually go into combat first, and they go into the San Miguel. And what's interesting with that is this is where they start to learn, their battle, what's going to work on the battlefield, what's going to work for them, and what's not going to work for them. Okay. And they find out that they're going to need logistics. That's the meat and potatoes, and it hasn't changed at all with tankers going into the 21st century. It hasn't changed at all, because you're going to need fuel, you're going to need ammunition, you're going to need, like in a modern battlefield, like I said, you're going to need fuel, you're going to need ammunition, you're going to need grease, you're going to need hydraulic fluid, you're going to need spare parts, idler wheels, tracks, spare track, because what happens if you bust track? You're going to need all that. And they found out, especially in the Argonne, not in the Argonne, but at San Miguel, that you break down, you're going to need to get pulled out of there. And there's only one thing that they did not do in France, and that wouldn't happen until World War II, is you got to have a recovery vehicle. That's one thing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that.
That's one thing they didn't have dedicated. And like I said, Patton is one thing he didn't envision, but I think later down the road they did. As you got it, and I've heard stories. I'm still trying to dig this up. I've heard stories of them actually having a makeshift crane on the back of a Packard Liberty truck. I've heard that because the Renaults were light enough that they could actually be picked up out of the ground. And I've heard, I can't remember where I heard it from, because I actually knew the curator down at the old Patton Museum at Fort Knox before they got moved down to Benning.
Okay.
And supposedly, it was Chris Lemons. Chris Lemons. I knew he's retired. Believe it or not, he's a retired Navy chief. Go figure this out. Retired Navy chief. Yeah, Chris Lemons. I don't know. Chris was a legend because when I was stationed at Fort Campbell, I used to go up to Fort Knox all the time, and because the Pat Museum was awesome, and Chris Lemons was the chief curator there. I mean, anything you wanted to know on the armor. I mean, he was. And dude, it's funny how I am Army, but with the Marine Corps, how Chris was with the Tank Corps.
Yep.
But Chris told me a story that, and I think he had a photograph. Because they learned their lessons at Sami Hill because they had to get some of the wrecks off the battlefield.
Okay.
And he said, yeah, some guy or one of the officers or one of the recovery NCOs came up with and said, hey, why don't we just make a makeshift crane, throw it on the back of a Liberty truck, and we can use it to pull these things off the back. Supposedly that's what they did. But the U.S. Army would not have a dedicated recovery vehicle until 1940 or 41. That's when the concept of the armored divisions, first came into being, and that went into World War II. Of course, we know what we have today with the 88.
Yep.
But that's where that came from. And the other thing is, they learned how to resupply. So, when Pat came up with the concept of how the structure of an armored battalion was, he had the concept. I think it was 5 trucks. With a resupply section, fully stocked. But in the meantime, they had a couple tanks assigned per company to haul a sled. They had, grease, oil, rations, another tank dedicated to haul a sled that had 37 or 8mm Lebel rounds, depending on what variant that you had. That way you do a resupply, basically a ROM, resupply on the move. So that way say, hey, get to a designated point here, you guys pull up here, we got the sleds here, that'll keep us, going until the main body gets here and they set up. But it's basically pull up here, if you guys need to get fuel, get the cans, pull them off the sled. If you need ammo, go grab it, pull it off the sled, whatever. So that's what they had. So that's basically how, and they learned logistics on the move. That's what keeps an army going. So that's one of the vital lessons, from World War I, believe it or not, that we still have today. And it's funny because everything's like it. You look at how things were then 108 years ago, and it's like this hasn't changed at all. It really hasn't at all.
Yeah. So I'd like to move into talking about some tankers, because when we spoke about putting this episode together, you mentioned you wanted to talk about some guys who had earned the DSC, the Distinguished Service Cross. Now, I know that in the Meuse-Argonne, in the area of Varennes, there was Donald Call. He's actually he's going to earn the Medal of Honor. Now, Donald Call is a tanker, and what he does, and I mentioned him in one of the Meuse-Argonne episodes, probably one of the earlier ones at the beginning of the Meuse-Argonne battle, is that he carried his wounded comrade, through fire.
Just the when we go back and we talk about what the tankers, like David M. Call, and he got promoted to corporal. You don't want to leave his tank commander, which by the name of was
a lieutenant.
Was it Watt? Yeah, it was a lieutenant. And what was it? Yeah, they were operating because part of the brigade, 3004th Brigade, was working with the 35th Division and the 28th Division, and it was outside of Varennes, and I didn't actually know where the area is at. And what was it? They got hit hard. They got hit with machine gun fire. It's just west of Varennes, and their tank got hit, and the officer, got knocked out in a turret, and the officer, before he got knocked out, he told Call to get out, go, get out of here, go. And he did, but then he turned around, went back, and pulled his tank commander out of the hatch.
Yes.
Under fire, and he got the Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
And
so we know about like the Medal of Honor, but like, as things go, like you remember the people who earn the Medal of Honor, but like, the DSC, which is just under the Medal of Honor. Like,
here's
also a big deal.
Here's a couple of them. Like, so you had mechanic PFC Charles Merritt from C Company 345th. He got his Medal of Honor while supporting the 138th Infantry just outside of Sheppey. And that the Argonne was rough. And I mean, it was rough because Sami Hill only lasted about 2 or 3 days, for the tank crews. And and we'll get there in a minute, but getting with the Argonne, it got nasty for the tankers of the 304th Tank Brigade. It did. I mean, it got flat out nasty. And so you had Charles Merrick. He gets the Distinguished Service Cross for supporting the attack working with the 2nd Battalion of 138. So he got his outside of Sheppey. Then you had Corporal William Brophy. He was Company A 345th. He gets the Distinguished Service Cross while working with the 28th Division, supporting the 112th Infantry Regiment up near just southwest of Apremont, and was it Tendu? He gets his he gets his Distinguished Service Cross up there.
Okay.
Then you had what was the other one? You had Harold Ash. He was a former sergeant. He gets his Distinguished Service Cross. Then there's another. Yeah, he supporting the 18th Infantry. He was with C Company 345th. He was supporting the 3rd Battalion of the 18th Infantry up in Montrebo Woods. That area got nasty. I mean, the Germans weren't playing games, and it's irony because I read some of the after-action reports or the fighting up at Montrebo, and the Germans. It's kind of ironic, but it really did happen. They were taking 77 millimeters and doing direct lace, and it's almost reminiscing what their children are going to do 20-something years later with an 88 millimeter popping off against Shermans in France.
Right.
Same. It's like boom, and so you say you had Harold Ash getting the Distinguished Service Cross supporting the 3rd of the 18th Infantry in there. Then you had another one with Harley Nichols. He gets the Distinguished Service Cross as a tank commander, and he was doing the same thing at Montrebo Woods. So, like I said, the fighting in Montrebo Wood was unbelievable. I mean, it was straight up in your face, no room, no holds barred. The Germans did not care. They were going after the Americans. Even if they were in a tank, they didn't care. They're coming after them.
Right.
They say they're using 77 and 155 howitzers, just like their fathers did, or their kids are going to do with an 88 millimeter, in a bocage in France. Literally, that's how bad it was. And in top of my head, you had at least 6 or 8 DSCs that alone that were awarded in the Argonne. That's how I know how many Silver Stars were awarded to the tank crews.
Mm-hmm.
The other one that I will love to mention also is Harold Roberts.
Okay.
And Harold Roberts. He was from San Francisco. He was a tanker from it's Harold W. Roberts, and he was with Was it company? Was it a company? Company A 344th.
Okay.
And they get the medal. He gets the Medal of Honor. What was it? It was October 4th. They were fighting up near Montrebo, and what was it? They were backing out of the position. The tank got into the water, and they were sinking. And he pushed his tank commander up out of the hatch to get him out of there because they sucked like a rock.
Yes.
Yeah. And he paid with his life to get that man out of that hatch because I don't know, Mike, if you ever seen inside an FT-17, these things are tiny.
It's tight. Yeah.
It's tight. I mean, you thought being in the M1, being in a driver's compartment. No, hey, man, that's luxury there, man. That's luxury.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the drivers just sit back and just fall asleep in that thing.
Mm-hmm.
But an FT, I mean, that thing was tight. So they're sinking. And Harold pushes his tank commander up out of the hatch, get him out of there. And unfortunately, he drowned to death. And for his action saving that man's life, he's awarded his country's highest award. He's got the Medal of Honor. I've actually been to his grave there at Mers Argonne.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm gonna have to put him on the list to visit.
He's buried. His cross is not too far from the chapel. It's on when you're walking up the pathway there at Mers Argonne.
Mm-hmm.
If you're walking up that pathway, I forgot what section. It's up on the northern section, but it's off the left-hand side, and it's like stone's throw from the chapel. And his grave is marked. Yeah, his grave is right there. It says Harold W. Roberts, Medal of Honor. 344 Tank Battalion and all that. But yeah, he was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions. So, like I said, there was a lot of heroics that were in the Argonne. There
it's like the old line. Uncommon valor was a common virtue amongst these guys.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the tank crews, they would not leave the guys on the ground. They didn't. And like I said, now getting back, like you're talking about with the very first tank operations is in the Argonne is where the 30, because they were still known as the first tank brigade until they got redesignated to 30. We'll just go with the 304 for right now, just keep things simple. So 304, they get their marching orders about a week prior to the Sami Hill. So they're offloaded. They're going to be out working with the 1st Division and 42nd Division. So we're going to be working. They're going to be on the far left flank of the American Corps when they do the Sami Hill offensive. And so the 344th is working with the 1st Division. 326 is working with the 1st Division. 327 is going to work with the 42nd Division.
Okay.
And things go off, according to plan. There's little hiccups here and there. Then what was it? This is the funny part. So Patton's leading the charge. Typical George S. Patton. He's in there leading the charge. That's who he runs into outside of what the hell's the name of that damn town? Essie? I can't. It's where the 42nd was. I can't.
Yes. Send me a I
think it's Essie. He runs into a very young Douglas MacArthur,
mm-hmm.
and they. This is irony because both of them. I was like, because their repertoire follows them into the next, as I call it, World War I sequel.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, that's where they first meet, and they wouldn't be the last time they meet because George S. Patton and Douglas MacArthur meet at the rally there in D.C. in the 30s with the bonus march.
The bonus army, yeah. Yep.
The bonus army. They actually meet because Patton's with the 3rd Cavalry and MacArthur's the chief of staff. He brings them in. So I'm like, and here's twisted irony. Sidebar on that. It's because Joe D'Angelo, who saved Patton's life, was in the bonus army. And it's like, oh my God. So it's irony. Speaking of DSCs, of course, know with Joe D'Angelo, what he did saving Patton's life.
Mm-hmm.
So, so things go off, like I said, with the Sami Hill offensive, with the 1st Division, they're pushing up and they actually get in the Beauvais plain there and they push almost near close to Mont Sec. So
Okay.
and they meet up with elements of the 26th Division that are coming down.
Right.
So like I say, it's only about 2 or 3 day operations. So things go according to plan. You had supporting the fight with the at Rich Corps, Lehayville. So like I said, things go according to plan. They get their baptism of fire per se. Then on September 22nd of 18, they get like 1 or 2 companies get shifted over to where the 82nd Division is at. They do a feint attack up in there. It's over by Pont-à-Mousson.
Okay.
In that area. So they do a feint attack. It just kind of push get the Germans off Pont-à-Mousson front. Then they get pulled off the lines and they do recovery operations. And that's when they get sent into the Meuse-Argonne offensive. And what's interesting, historical note, is if you ever look on the World War I American FT-17s, right after Somme Hill, this is where they come up with the card system. And you ever see?
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's where that comes into play, is because the 326 / actually the 344, they get the red colored plane. If you ever see like a picture of that one FT-17 is coming up like this, if you look on the turrets, you see the playing card symbol. So you had what was it? First platoon was a spade. Second platoon was a heart, and third platoon was a diamond. But
interesting. Okay.
344 had red, where the 345th was green. So that's where that playing card system comes into play. So, and if you ever look at that way, you always can tell who an American FT-17 is compared to a French one. The French used to put their playing card symbol on the tail of the 17 on the hull, where the Americans put it on the turret. That's why you can tell the difference between it.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. That's a piece of trivia. I didn't realize that. Cool. Steve,
so that's where that comes into play.
Yeah. So for listeners who want to learn more, is it mainly the 2 books that we mentioned, Pershing's Tankers? There's
Pershing's Tankers, which I highly recommend.
Yep, that's a good book.
Matter of fact, I highly recommend because you're getting the personal narrative side of things on that side, but the holy grail per se is Colonel Wilson's. I actually knew Colonel Wilson. He wrote Treat 'em Rough. Yeah, I actually did. Really nice guy. Yeah, I forgot what tank battalion he was with. I think it was either in Korea that I met him. Yeah, I think it had to be Korea because I think he was with either 1st or 2nd Tank, which for you folks out there, that's either 1st Battalion or 2nd Battalion and 72nd Armor. But for us in the military, they're called 1st or 2nd Tank.
Right.
But because I remember, I think he was the operations. I think he was the S3 officer when I met him. But that book I highly recommend, Treat 'em Rough, because he gives a complete layout on how all this started. And it's a very interesting read. It really is, because he goes from the very beginning of the Tank Corps during operations in France, and also with the 301st up north. And like I said, with those guys, their first combat out to shoot, well, up by Fosse, they get hammered. Do they? And they learned their lessons the hard way. Yeah, because the Germans, they weren't playing games because they already knew with the Brits up at Cambrai with that. So when the American 301st goes into combat for the first time supporting the Australians, I think it's Fosse where they were at. Germans were doing the same thing. They were taking 77 millimeters and doing direct laser.
Yeah,
and they were popping, as we say in the mech world, popping at the top, sweetheart. Right. Exactly what watching that turret go. Got an eye. I mean, they were knocking out Mark Fives like they were nothing, like beached whales.
Yeah.
But they learned a lesson. But then they go on to St. Quentin Canal. They end up fighting up in that sector with the Brits, and their legacy, it reverberates to this day as well. But getting back to what we were talking about, Mike, with Colonel Wilson's book, Trade 'em Rough, that is highly recommended. I highly recommend that to anybody whoever wants to learn anything about the tank corps in World War I. That's the book you really need to read.
All right.
Then you read Pershing's Tankers next, because that's telling the personal side of things. Okay. And if you want to learn about that, folks, listen to Mike's podcast on that. And I highly recommend that as well. That's a great, because you're actually seeing what these guys, what they're experiencing. It's like, being a raw recruit, get sent off this organization that you really don't know nothing about, and you're learning how to be a tanker. Then you go into combat. It's like, oh man, it's kind of cool, but I'm studying this rolling sardine can. Like, what do I, right? It's my life. It's only go through this barrel slit here, so that's life.
Yeah. No, exactly. All right, so we will. I'll make sure that the links to both of those books are in the episode notes. And all right. And earlier, Steve, you mentioned railhead operations. So I have this is a great story that I actually tell over at the day job as an example of what you have to do sometimes and what life calls for. So in Germany, okay, so railhead ops. If you're gonna, so folks listening, if you're non-military, you don't really drive tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles on the streets. Especially if you're going to move them from say Boston to New York, you're not going to drive. Yeah. You put them on a train, right? Number one, tanks rip up the road. Yeah. Number two, the travel rips up the vehicles. So you want to try and minimize that.
Hey, there's no track pads like they're nothing.
Yes, exactly. So, okay, so this is Germany. We're railheading our tanks and Bradleys to go to Grafenwehr for gunnery training.
Oh yeah, gunnery.
Right. So in Germany, you operated with the German railroad crews, and they had their way of doing it. And there were no you didn't have to strap the tank down or anything. It was just done with chalk blocks. It was really quite something to see. But for folks watching the video, I hope this is going to be a good visual. So you have a rail car, right? Just a flat car that you can, put vehicles on top of it. There's no walls or anything. It's just a flat surface. I'm going to use my hand. So my fist. So this is the rail car, right? However, and you're going to put the tank on this, right? So this is like looking at it from a front view. Now, the problem is that the M1A1 Abrams tank is this heavy. Wide. It was wider than the rail car. So it was, you had to bring it on. You had to guide it on very carefully. And part of the track is going to be on the rail car. Part of the track is actually going to be off. So there's not a whole lot of room for maneuver. So I'm a young 20-year-old sergeant. And this is my first time railheading my tank heading off to gunnery. So, I'm desperately watching the other guys do it in the tanks ahead of me as they're putting their tanks on the train, and then it's like, okay, I think I know, I think I have an idea of what I'm going to do. Kind of nervous, you're certainly not, you're going to have to do this. So that's just the way it goes. But I did, as my tank is coming up and I'm the next, I'm going to be the next tank getting on the train. I did turn to a sergeant first class, and I said to him, "Hey, Sergeant, I've never really done this before, and these are words that I now live by." As he turned to me, he gave me a quick look, and then he looked away, and it's the Army, so he was like, "Well, don't fuck it up," and and then he walked away, and that's also the Army for you, because how you learn. Yeah, that's how you learn. That's how you learn how to do hard things. So
Mike, that hasn't changed. Like you said, Patton's tankers, same thing in 1918. And I've seen the photographs. Doing railroad operations. They're putting their Renaults on flat cars. Mike, it hasn't changed in 108 years. It's the same thing. Roll them up on there. Hey, you go from one car to the one at a time. Get them where they're at. Hey, put chalk blocks, lateral blocks on there. Boom, boom. That's it. No change, no nothing.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Now,
yeah, that's it.
With irony, what's got irony is one thing I really want to touch is a couple of individuals, like you said, that really had a lasting impact that would go into World War I, the sequel. Is after the hostilities ended in November of 18, so the Tank Corps, especially the 304th, they're working with the 35th Division, 28th Division, and like I said, they get beat up pretty hard. The first division, about the first week of, the first 2 weeks of October of 18. So after that, they get pulled off the lines, do recovery operations. They get shoved back up there again. So they end up working with, which is kind of cool. But this is their last big combat operation, the 42nd Division again, and of course my beloved 2nd Division. And so they're actually working with their last big combat, believe it or not, is with the 5th Marines, so the 4th Brigade, up by Landres St. George's. That's where they're at. So after they advance, they get pulled off to do, final recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And they're beat up. I mean, they had to. After Patton got wounded in the Argonne, Brent becomes acting brigade commander, and they're taking some losses. I mean, they really are. So they finally get pulled off the lines to get repair battle damage, get some replacements in, and then the armistice takes effect. Then they get sent to a staging area. Then from there they get shipped back to the States. So while this is going on, the tank center here at Gettysburg gets deactivated.
Okay.
And all the personnel, including a newly minted Major Eisenhower, they get sent to Camp Meade, Maryland. And so when the Tank Corps, AEF Tank Corps, comes back from France, they get shipped to Camp Meade. And guess who gets to meet who for the very first time? Major Dwight David Eisenhower gets to meet a rough and shod Lieutenant Colonel George S. Patton.
Oh, okay.
That friendship starts right then and there.
Oh, interesting.
So, yes, it's interesting because their friendship would last from 1918 all the way into the World War I's sequel, World War II. So, so Patton and Ike, George and Ike, they go back. They go all the way back to World War I. So that's how that friendship started up. So it started up at Camp Meade, Maryland, in 1919 when George got back from France. So that's why Ike and George, they are very close because they knew each other. So what's irony is Ike ends up being George's superior in World War II. Yeah, that's fortunately that so that friendship started. Then Cyrano Brett, getting with him, he's the only officer of the original Tank Corps that stayed with the tanks after World War I, because what happens is the Tank Corps gets downsized,
right? And
by Congress, so the Army doesn't want to give up what they just got, because they say, hey, we're going to need these tanks for in case we go to war again, which ironically happens 20-something years later down the road.
Right.
But so what they do is they decide, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to put the tanks into the infantry branch to protect it. So that's what happens.
Okay.
So the 301st comes back from the Brits. They get sent to Camp Meade. 344th. They stay as well in the 311th Tank Recovery Company, Salvage and Repair Company, they end up going down to Fort Benning.
Okay.
They didn't set up, and this is where I also get with you tankers as well. Oh, Fort Benning's no, yes, it is. Fort Benning was the home of the armor until Fort Knox in the 1930s was established with the 7th Mecha Brigade. So yes, because Mike, I was there at Benning when the armor school got announced. It was like all you guys were crying, like, "Oh my God, I gotta leave Fort Knox! Oh no, no, bitch, your ass went to Fort Benning where you're going. That's where you guys started out at. So I don't want to hear. Here's a box of tissue. Go cry in a tank." So, but yeah, so
fair enough.
But the that's where the 66th armor comes into play here. So they become the nucleus of the surviving tank corps from World War I.
Mm-hmm.
To keep these guys, the Army, the guys did it for reasons to keep them alive as an organization. So you got to go somewhere. So
right.
What the Army did, they kind of did it slick wise. Is well, we can't have a tank corps, so we'll kind of 66 infantry in parentheses light tanks. What they cover, so that way Congress doesn't come out and say, "Well, yeah, you guys don't have any." Well, they're not tankers per se. They're light. They're like this, 66 infantry light tanks. It's like, okay, so that's why they did what they did, but also is the support the armor, future armor officers that were going to play in dividends in World War II down the road, because a lot of these guys, they got schooled here at Benning. And so in the 60s, guys from the 66 became a demonstration outfit, with the Liberty tanks, and the Renaults that we had brought back from France until, Christie came out with his system. And that's why the Army adopted that.
Yep.
So that, which became the M2, the M3, Stuart light version of light tanks. Then it became the M5, of course, the M4 Sherman. But now Cyrano E. Brett, he's the only one that stayed in the tank corps from this very inception to World War II, because it's kind of irony. I love and respect George Patton. Mm-hmm. George had his quirks, and he did. And Helen, if you're listening to this, please don't get mad at me. But I love your grandfather to death. I actually know Helen Patton. I really do.
That's super cool.
She is. She's awesome. George, the only regret I have with George Patton, he should have stayed with the tank corps, but he didn't, because it's a turf war thing with him, because he wanted to stay. He wanted the tank corps to become a separate branch. And the thing is, it wasn't time for that just yet. It wasn't. So that when the tank corps got bankrolled into the infantry, he's like, "No, I'm out of here." So he requested to go back to the cavalry, which he did.
Okay.
Matter of fact, 3rd Cavalry, which is old rusty rifles. That's their patron saint. So he spent most of his career in the 20s and 30s with 3rd Cav.
Okay.
Until the Louisiana maneuvers in late 1940, and when he saw the partition of, oh my God, they're bringing back the armor. They're going to bring the armor division. He wanted back in it. So he finally wised up and said, "Hey, I want it back in. I want back in." So, so Adna Chaffee, and this is kind of pertaining to World War I, II, what we're talking about with the tankers. Adna Chaffee everybody says George Patton is the father of armor. Well, kind of. He is, because he's the one that started the inception. However, Adna R. Chaffee is the father of the modern tank corps or armor branch. He is. And Adna brought George. They were good friends. Mm-hmm. Adna brought him back in. He command of one of the brigades to George Patton in 2nd Armor Division. And sadly, Adna Chaffee died of cancer in 41. Yeah, I think 41 or 42, somewhere in there. And there's always been a historical what if had he lived. Because he would eclipse George Patton. Because Adna if it hadn't been for him, the armored division concept would have never taken fold. It would never happen. Adna is the one that foresaw, because he did. He took Patton and Rockenbach and Blaines. He saw what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to make it bigger and better. That's where the armored division came in concept. And when they did the Louisiana maneuvers in 40, and they're like, holy crud. It's like, this, because the 7th Mechanized Brigade out of Fort Knox, they are the nucleus for the 1st Armored Division.
Oh, okay.
Because he had, what was it, the 13th Cav, and I forgot what 13th Armor, and there was 2 armor and 1, 6th Infantry, 13th Armor, and there was another Cav outfit, but they were armor. They became the nucleus of the 1st Armored Division. So Adna, who knew Patton, brought him in. It's like, hey, I need you to do this. So they did. So that, like I said, that, and with Brett became, he's the only armor officer that was there from the very beginning in 1917 all the way to 1942, 43, because his health, he actually was with the 5th Armored Division. He actually stood that division up from scratch. And he became, I think, the assistant division commander. Yeah, because a brigadier general. Yeah, but his health was failing him from all the combat he had in 1918 in France. I think he started to get the effects of gas.
Okay.
And it started to tear his lungs out. So then he's like, hey, I can't do this. And the guy's like, hey, look, dude, you've already done your time in the last word. Hey, go home. Hey, we got this.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
That's how, like I said, but the irony of with Patton and Eisenhower, that started at Camp Meade, Maryland, in 1919. So like I said, these two known each other since World War I.
Yeah.
Literally, they did. But like I said, that's why I had a love-hate relationship with George. Like that famous ass chewing that you see in North Africa, when I gets Patton in a staff car and he's ripping him a new one, because he knew what George did. Like I said, they knew each other since they were young officers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey George, you screwed up, didn't you? Yeah, because you can see that. If you ever see that one I'm talking about, Mike, where Patton's in staff, and he's just chewing ass. Yeah, because he knew George. But that's how that friendship came out. Like I said, all this intertwines with how this is. Like I said, all this reverberates from the very first tankers there in France in 1918 all the way to what we have now.
Wow.
And the armor crews, George Patton, Cyrano Brett, Rockenbach could see into the future what they had started. They'd be damn proud, especially, seeing a little, FT-17 to a brand new M1 A2 SEP 3 Abrams tank with the state-of-the-art fire control system. You were like, holy shit. It was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Steve, man, thanks for
well, that's irony as well, because you didn't have stabilization in a turret in FT-17. You're just like, you're just holding on.
Right.
With Step 3, that state-of-the-art fire control system, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. Oh man, thanks for coming on the podcast, dude. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. This has been great. Folks.
Thanks, Mike.
I'll link out to the 2 books that you should read, and Steve, there's I don't know. We'll figure out something else to talk about here soon.
I still want to do one on Pershing. You're going to have to do a round table on that one.
Okay.
That one I've always said you really got to do a round table on Pershing, because Pershing is a very, very interesting character, and he does need to be talked about.
Okay. Yeah, we can work that up, man. All right. All right. Just stay with me here.